You realize that when you have almost nothing, every customer, every hire, every decision matters. When we started building up the brand, the even the market understanding about what is a cash recycling ATM and convincing the ecosystem. So in a market like India, banks are very cautious when it comes to technology, and especially a mission critical infrastructure technology like a cash recycling ATM, which is dealing with counterfeit and cash. So convincing them to trust a relatively brand new entrant, that was not easy. I'm, looking after operations, then I'm looking at partnerships, and sometimes you're doing all this in the same day. So I think that was the tough part. At the same time, that was the interesting part. And there has to be the customer. Okay. And at the center of it all is the customer. The end is the customer. The beginning is the customer. And, sales will go and promise something to the customer. Service has to ensure they deliver it. Operations cannot be a flash in the pan. They have to, consistently sustain what has been promised. But from a strategy standpoint, we have to remain viable. And that's not tough in any business because there are so many variables, new variables every day. And you have to somehow align what you have been doing in a way that you keep yourself viable in the long run. There was a certain software that we were selling to them. And I realized at that point that the software that we have is, we are promising more than what we have. Really need one is the focus. What am I really good at? There's something called a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal in this book, Good to Great. And that speaks so beautifully about a company should know about its focus. What does it want to do? Where does it want to focus? What product, which customer category? And, once that is clear and you're aligned with your tech or your services or whatever it is for that, what matters is the culture.
So Rupinder, welcome to Automation Age Leadership podcast series. So to start with, to begin, so you have spent over 25 years in banking technology and the payment ecosystem. So what initially drew you to this industry? So why banking?
Well, to be honest, it was a fluke. I didn't plan any of it. I happened to work with a tech company called CMC. And I was started as a humble account manager. And among the accounts that I was asked to manage, banking domain was passed on to me. And that's how it happened. But what fascinated me about this bit was the tech and the payments ecosystem, which at that time was very, very initial. But some of the tech companies had already started doing some work in the mobile banking space. And of course, amongst the industries that we have today, there are very few who have this very interesting intersection where you have tech and trust and financial inclusion, the way banking does. So that's how banking happened.
Yeah. So looking back at your career, what were some defining moments that shaped your journey towards becoming a CEO? You mentioned you started as a humble account manager or relationship manager. From there to the CEO. So what were the defining moments?
So to be honest, Prasad, it just happened. There was nothing which was carved out thoughtfully. But if I look back at it, some things happened in a good way. For instance, very early on in my career, I got an opportunity to take ownership of a P&L. And when that happens, you are forced to think beyond just your function. Your function could be sales or projects or execution, but you are forced to think beyond and understand the impact on the entire business. The second thing perhaps was, the experience of building a team. So when I was with a company called Diebold, at that time, it had just taken over the India entity, and we were building up the team for something called managed services at that stage. And I was asked to lead that function. That gave me an opportunity to build the team and literally build a business from scratch, which really teaches you humility and resilience. So, you realize that when you have almost nothing, every customer, every hire, every decision matters. Right. So I think I think these opportunities to take ownership of a P&L and to start building from a scratch, it really helped me in my CEO, coming up to a CEO journey.
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. And as you mentioned, like, I mean, you have built the business like with that opportunity, leading that vertical ground up. So, so that taking back to early years, what were like the toughest challenges when establishing Oki in the market here? I mean, it was like the new player, and then
Yeah.
what were the challenges like building the market here?
So, when I joined Oki, in fact, before I joined Oki, I didn't know, I never heard of Okis. In
Yeah.
Punjabi, Oki means, what is that? Okay. So
Yeah.
it was literally, that was my, expression the first time I heard about Oki. And when I look back, I don't regret a single decision that I took. I'm glad I took on a relatively unknown brand for those times in India. But when we started building up the brand, the even the market understanding about what is a cash recycling ATM and convincing the ecosystem, which was vast. You have banks, you have partners, you have services organizations who you want to associate with. So in a market like India, banks are very cautious when it comes
Yeah.
to technology, and especially a mission critical infrastructure technology like a cash recycling ATM, which is dealing with counterfeit and cash. So convincing them to trust a relatively brand new entrant, that was not easy. That was tough. It needed intense amount of patience, consistency, and establishing your performance through consistent, engagement. So, at the same time, I was wearing hats like I was a janitor and I was a salesperson, and suddenly I'm, looking after operations. Then I'm looking at partnerships, and sometimes you're doing all this in the same day. So I think that was the tough part. At the same time, that was the interesting part.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, like you have, I mean, wore the multiple hats like sales, service, P&L, ownership, strategy, and definitely those were like you have been wearing multiple hats.
Right, right, right. So I think the biggest thing is, and there has to be the customer. Okay. And at the center of it all is the customer. The end is the customer. The beginning is the customer. And, sales will go and promise something to the customer. Service has to ensure they deliver it. Operations cannot be a flash in the pan. They have to, consistently sustain what has been promised. But from a strategy standpoint, we have to remain viable, and that's not tough in any business because there are so many variables, new variables every day, and you have to somehow align what you have been doing in a way that you keep yourself viable in the long run. So I guess this mix of it is what is what one needs to in a business like this.
And I think you rightly pointed, like whatever you are working on, the customer centricity, and then you, I mean, rightly pointed out, like the customer is at the center. So like the BFSI industry, again, like which runs on like the trust, the reliability, long-term partnership. What
Right.
does it truly take to build a long-lasting relationship with banks and the financial institution? Like,
Right. So I think it's I think not very difficult. It's doing simple, small things every day, and every day means you're doing consistently. So you don't want to promise what you can't do. You have to have those sensible discussions, which are not easy, because a lot of banks will ask for the moon, and rightfully so, because they have equally demanding, requirements, whether it's from a regulator standpoint, whether it is from their customer standpoint, and also because when you have issues on downtime or security, there are very serious consequences for them. It's not as simple as for a different vertical. So to build trust, it is just consistent engagement. It is not just a technology piece, but what you're doing in every single interaction. Are you reliable? You will have, but are you responding when you have problems? And when you have problems, are you transparent about it? Look, I have a problem. This is what is the impact of that, rather than trying to cover up. So I think that is what builds the trust with them. And I'll give you an example. I had one customer many years back, I won't name the bank, and I at that time a senior mid management role, and there was a certain software that we were selling to them. And I realized at that point that the software that we have is, we are promising more than what we have. And then I told the customer, you know what, we don't have this. We don't have a reference customer which I can talk of where this is successful. So please make a decision keeping that in mind. And I think maybe it didn't land us the business there in the short term, but in the long term, it really helped the relationship where he appreciated the transparency and he could trust whatever, one would tell him in the future.
Yeah. And I remember one of the scenario where we worked together, that was back in 2006 or 7, one of the PSU bank. And then there were like the firefighting situation. And then we realized the DR was not working. And then later on, when you figured out like the guy who was sweeping the thing, he used to switch off the server and then there was no backup. And then they said like, oh, it is not working. And that was like the stress situation, saying, guys, like you have given the cluster and then the technology should just fall back. But I mean, I remember that incidents like where, I mean, the situation was tense and then the firefighting, but you just faced it, because like you need to face the customer, because running away at that point of time, definitely like the trust is lost. But I really, because I have seen you doing that. So, I mean, I just remembered that moment.
Thank you. And I recall we had a tough time. I won't name the bank right now, but we had a tough time on managing that one big project, right?
I know. I know. I know it was really a nightmare. And then when that is where like I mean, we can't just name the things, but the situation was really tight. And then I have seen you, I mean, really facing and right from the front. So like captain batting from the front. I mean, that is where, so I remember that somewhere in 2006-7, that situation. So So in your experience, so I mean, what differentiate the companies successfully scale up in BFSI ecosystem versus those struggle to sustain the growth? I mean, what is that like the key to be successful?
So, I love sales. I love strong salespeople. But I don't think that is what helps companies scale their business. That can bring the business. They are a very important leg of what we do. But what you really need, one, is the focus. What am I really good at? There's something called a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal in this book, Good to Great. And that speaks so beautifully about a company should know about its focus. What does it want to do? Where does it want to focus? What product? Which customer category? And, once that is clear and you're aligned with your tech or your services or whatever it is for that, what matters is the culture, right? So do you have the culture where people are aligned and they understand that what takes you from here to here will not take you to the next level? But the culture is what brings in the discipline, the understanding, the alignment. And in all of this, what truly works every single step of the way is the execution. So I think that leaders today, they are hands-on. They are execution people. You can't just be strategy. You can't just be sales. If I had to choose between all of this, I would think that execution is a very powerful ability which would differentiate companies that scale.
I think it looks well articulated, because like otherwise it is said like plan remains plans unless it is executed, because then it is just on the paper. So I mean, what is the key is like really getting that executed. So many
to just add that, I'm sorry to interrupt. A very strong sense of that is what I learned working with Oki, being a Japanese company. They spend far more time on the planning part. So that when you are executing, you are able to do it far better. You, of course, on the fly, you still calibrate, but your ability to execute depends significantly upon your ability to plan.
Yeah.
So that's just one point I wanted to make.
I mean, that's a great point. So many organizations talk about these days, like about digital transformation. You'll hear it in those like the event people, leaders talking about like digital transformation. That is a key. That is the way forward. But execution often becomes a real challenge. So what separate institution that execute well from those maybe like partially you have addressed that, but not pertaining to the digital transformation. So what is like your opinion about it? So digital transformation initiative.
So, digital transformation to me, I mean, we have beautiful versions today of AI and other things. Just keep it simple. I would think firstly you need to know what you want to do. What is the process? What is the right process that you want to implement? And finally, you have to be able to execute that process. If just it's a process on paper which is not possible to be executed, you cannot digitally transform any which way. So the first test is your process, and then you align with it to ensure that it is a standard. You don't want to have exceptions around it, which means people need to have the discipline to align that, look, has to be followed. And it's not about technology, really. I won't even call it transformation, maybe because when we started here about 12, 13 years back, we started with basics like, okay, challenges in organization is, let's say, cash flow. So what is your ability to manage the O to C cycle, order to cash cycle? How do you start? What visibility do you have? Treat it like a workflow which is completely automated on a system. So if you get a good technology partner, the real ownership is still with the business teams, where you have clear ownership and you decide, okay, this is what you're going to implement. This is the process that I want. And the leadership, whether it's ops or tech or any other partners that you have involved in the ecosystem, they align with it. So it's not just strategically what I want to do, but you decide what piece everyone else would be executing and how they are integrated, and the performance of the people who are involved in the project would be around specific measurable outcomes. And I think that makes it just a way of doing business on a daily basis, not as a special digital transformation project.
Yeah. So you have witnessed like evolution in banking technology and payments in India for last more than 2 decades. So what major shift have been normative in last 2 decades? So which one would you rate like the major transformative change?
Well, I think number one thing is that you want to optimize cost and resources and be more efficient in everything you do more and less. And therefore, the focus tends to be on automation of your operational processes, especially if I speak of BFSI, especially in how you process a transaction, how you engage a customer, how do you reconcile so that you minimize issues. And so I think automation of all processes are seen as a big default trend. And the second, we think, which is becoming increasingly relevant and increasingly possible, is the role of AI in handling risk, fraud detection, and even the customer interaction. So, I think AI, which has been more of a buzzword all this while, we are seeing far better visibility of what can be done with AI, especially in the risk and fraud space. And mostly that. And thirdly, I think from a bank specific point of view, they think that it is no longer digital versus physical channels, not branch versus mobile banking or ATM versus UPI. The integration of these channels, both digital and physical, are the most optimal way, rather than looking at them as competing models. And bank see that more and more because they want to make sure that, like I said, they want to do more with less.
So yeah, you mentioned and for the banks, like risk and fraud like is a major concern, detecting the anomalies, etc. And that is like when the real-time payment transactions are happening. So I mean, it's a valid point you have mentioned here. So from operational perspective, what does automation deliver the fastest and the most measurable ROI in the banking?
I think in any space, if we are doing something which is high volume and repetitive, which is of the same kind of process, but there's a high volume, I think you'll automatically have the fastest ROI there because you would minimize the need for probably people being involved because it's a like a process for reconciliation, for cash management, or even transaction monitoring in a switching environment, right? So, but sometimes, of course, we can have unrealistic expectations where we think automation alone will solve the issue. It won't. Sometimes we have to see design issues which need to be solved before you can, just automate it and, remove repetitive operational issues.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a valid point where you mentioned like there are like some unrealistic expectation about the AI because AI alone will not solve that, and at times maybe like banks or the institution, I mean, they will use the like the human in loop, etc. kind of way. So there is always like the maker and checker, like you cannot like 100%
Right.
leave the things on the AI or on the agentic AI. So when leaders
Right.
invest in transformation programs, what is the one common mistake you see in the organizations are making?
I think again boils down to process. Very boring answer, but that's what it really is. Transformation is not about the tech. There is lots of tech available, but real transformation requires process redesign, capability building internally, and of course, the most critical to me is the cultural alignment. Do people understand that this is not about taking away their jobs? It's about making them more efficient. So unless we have this process and people and the capability piece in place, tech investments may not deliver their full potential.
So, I mean, everyone is like gung ho about like the digital channels and the digital experience, so which is expanding rapidly. So, how do you see the role of the physical banking these days? Like when earlier it used to be like the physical banking, people walking into the branches, withdrawing the
Right.
money, etc. So, where do you see it in the next 5 to 10 years?
So what we are seeing a few years back, maybe COVID times and around then, there were kind of news around about how some of the countries were shutting down branches. Let's say US or France or the UK. But today, if you look at it, the banks are seeing the importance of physical infrastructure so much so that these countries are again coming back and focusing on branches. So physical infrastructure will evolve rather than disappear. Banks are wanting to have more automation for sure. They want more integration with the digital channel. They want the customers to have the same look and feel that they have on a ATM and they have in a branch. And in fact, even in India, we find banks who now say, you know what, we need smaller branches, not a 2,000 square feet branch, maybe a 200 square feet branch, where I can have a high level of automation. So most of the transactions which are happening at a teller, they can be migrated to a self-service environment, whether it is, of course, high value deposit, high value withdrawal. Mind you, not just a normal small amount which you do at a ATM, but the higher value ones. And also things like KYC or, bank statement or, scanning of documents which you necessarily need for KYC. So we are finding banks talking about devices which can do more than just they were traditionally doing. And they want automation in the branch environment. So in many markets, and I think especially in Asia, where there are people of different profiles and a large number of that, cash and digital will coexist for a long time. So the real innovation lies in making our physical infrastructure smarter and definitely more cost efficient.
Yeah. So it will be less cash and it will never be like the cashless. So
Yes.
yeah. So when it is
We
less
believe so.
cash, yeah. So just to continue on that, so as the automation and AI reshape operations, so how should leader think about rescaling teams and redesigning organization role? Because it is like it is not like AI against the human, but AI and human working together. So how the rescaling of the team, redesigning of the organization role you see?
So, whenever we hear these AI stories and we have Claude and we have something else coming up, and then we say, okay, you know what, it's going to take away the jobs of investment bankers or take away the jobs. Now, the reality is some change or the other has been happening for the last 50 years, 70 years, different kinds of change, right? May have been from a steam engine to a electric engine and so on and so forth. But the roles of people changed, the value add they created changed. So the organizations that will succeed will be those that invest in reskilling and learning cultures. So leaders have to think about that my people who I have today are great fundamentally, but are they equipped to deal with the changing needs of automation, which is not about replacing people, but about elevating their capabilities. So, and also if we speak about routine work becoming automated, then we want our people to be more capable of analysis, decision making, and very, very critical customer engagement. So I think the reskilling part is important, and including every leader has to understand that you have to unlearn some and learn some, and that's the only way you can stay relevant in today's days.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a complementary technology, but you need to upscale. And the same thing has happened, I think, early 90s when the computers came. People thought like computers will steal their job. I mean, nothing. I mean, when you upgrade your skill towards the technology, definitely like the role is changed, and then definitely it works you as an assistant. So how you see, whether you want to see like the half glass full or half glass empty view of it. So I mean, it's a right point.
True.
Yeah. So
yes,
what banks and the technology partners do differently to collaborate better and deliver like the real operational outcome rather than technology deployment? Because it shouldn't be just the technology deployment, but how that collaboration should happen for the getting the better result.
I love your question, Prasad, and I just wish that we had some banks also listening to this. So a lot of discussions today, especially with the government sector, tends to be contractually driven. There is a scope and there is a contract which drives the scope. But the most effective partnerships are where both sides are focused on shared outcomes rather than just that as the technology partner, this is my contractual deliverable, right? So which means that rather than coming up with a solution and then saying, okay, here go, I need a partner to implement this, there should be an early collaboration in problem definition, design, and the implementation framework. So I think that is the need of the hour. There is no one solution, number one. And number two is that the market, the world is evolving so quickly that what worked yesterday as a great solution today is defunct. So you need to be able to consistently collaborate in, being flexible with the design and the implementation framework. And I think basically some of the banks have started seeing that they see the technology vendor, not just as somebody they have a contract with, but somebody who's part of their ecosystem as a partner, not as a vendor. So I think in those scenarios, the results should definitely be, significantly stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I think both bank and then partner work together as a partner, and it is not like the two side of the table. But if both gets on the one side of the table to achieve the common goal, I mean, I'm sure like
Right.
that's what like the is a key to make the project successful, and it's just not the technology deployment, but just to I mean achieve some objective or a common goal. So, in your role of VP APAC and CEO, what are the strategic priorities driving the growth across the region?
So I think, for us, there are some markets which are developed and which have evolved well for us. And like, for example, India is a strong, big market for us. Malaysia is a very strong market for us. Some of the other markets may be smaller, but with potential. So in those scenarios, the focus for me, first of all, is to deepen the partnerships, the relationships with the key banking partners in those regions, right? Second is that we have today very specific technologies or products which are in demand, which are replacing the old fashioned cash dispensing technology in many countries. In some other countries, it is still in a process of that mindset migration. And there, how to expand the thought process of those financial institutions, how they can improve operational efficiency, how they can improve automation for themselves. That needs a very different kind of strategic engagement. So I think this is the second piece, and I think thirdly, what we are trying to do is that India gives a beautiful platform where you are able to work with the scale, and at the same time you are able to innovate quickly enough. So the banks here are full of ideas, and once since we have a manufacturing in India, our ability to work on the inputs from the customer helps us come up with, I would say, innovation, even if in the short term, and use that to test the market and see whether we can use this to scale up in India, or drive growth across the broader APAC region. So these are the broad things that we're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, and as you rightly said, like India, once like it is in the innovation, and then what is important here in India is
Right.
always the pressure is speed to market, time to market kind of things, and then the another point which you made is the scale. So that itself,
Right.
because like if you meet all these things, like it's a acid test or like the benchmark of your
Yeah.
product, the real benchmark. Earlier there used to
True.
be like the through the simulator, but this is a
Yeah.
real world thing where all the things are tested, and once it
Right.
works here, it works everywhere. Like, and there are
Yeah.
a lot of example in the banking fraternity about such
Right.
things.
Right. And Prasad, like you know well, we think that, oh, India is low cost price, therefore should be low quality. Absolutely not. I think the
Yeah,
expectations are highest quality, lowest price. Which is a
absolutely.
crazy balance, which is what we keeps us on our feet all the time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you rightly pointed. I mean, low cost doesn't mean like it is the quality is compromised. I mean, the Ryanair CEO, he says like we are low cost, we are not cheap. So there is
Yeah.
a cost. Yeah. So like if you hear his podcast, so he talks about it like there is a difference between the cheap and low cost, because like we have
Yeah.
optimized the cost because of X, Y, Z reasons. Similarly,
Right.
like because we are when we also discuss being the Indian make in India way, but we are an Indian MNC. So the similar thing like we talk about it, we are low cost, not cheap. So, I mean,
Right.
that's a valid point like you made here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, having like 2 decades plus experience in building and scaling the business to the like the magnitudes, what advice would you give leaders preparing for the next decade of the change in BFSI and technology?
Um, so I think long-term thinking will never go out of style. okay, or out of a mandate. Okay, the long-term thinking is an absolute need. But the most important one, which has always been there, but more important than ever before, is adaptability. The next decade will reward leaders who combine adaptability with long-term thinking. Now, whether it is AI or whether it is technology in general, the cycles are accelerating. But the fundamentals of leadership, whether it is trust, whether it's execution, clarity of purpose, I think that doesn't change. That remains constant. So as long as you are curious to find out what's happening out there, how does it impact me? How will it impact the future? And as long as you're open to learning so that you stay relevant and you are willing to know that what you have today is not good enough for tomorrow, therefore you have to reinvent yourself and your organization continuously. So as long as you are aligned with that, you're good for next 10 years also.
Yeah. So looking ahead, what excites you about the future of banking and financial technology?
I think fintech is like, so funny thing is when it is a hardware driven technology in finance, we call it tech fin. Okay. When it is a software driven tech, we call it a fintech. But broadly speaking, it will remain a combination of two. We will definitely continue to have more and more innovation happening globally. India is, of course, something which has been a leader all through, and it will continue to be a role model, I think, for other emerging markets as well. But I think we will continue to see more and more innovation, which would be probably driven out of India.
That's good. So finally, if you had to summarize your leadership philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
I think lead with questions. Okay, we are tempted to lead by answers, but build trust, empower people, and just stay very focused on creating long-term value creation, and ask lots of questions along the way. That's my style, at least.
Yeah. So like that's what like Challenger Sales says, like be a trusted advisor. So
Yeah.
yeah, Challenger says like you would have read that book or that Matt Dixon. So like
Yeah.
yeah, it's a value selling and then being a trusted advisor. Like yeah.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
so yeah, so Rupinder, it was like really nice to be here, and then wonderful like insight from your end, and then
Good to hear.
yeah, and then we can continue to talk for like hours, but looking at the things like
Sure.
your schedule, etc. We will continue that kind of conversation. We'll be more than happy to be in touch with you and then seek your guidance, like saying about our journey, take some suggestions from you.